everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And today we have very special guests that we are talking with the hosts of Home for Hallmark, Molly and Brad. And they have a new book that they showed, If Only Christmas Would Come. And we're so excited to talk to them about that. And thanks so much to both of you, Molly and Brad, for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Excited to be here.
So I am really curious about y'all's backstory, about how you end up doing this podcast. It was you all are neighbors, right? Is that right?
We are. So we liked to call ourselves neighbor friends at first. We had done a couple of local theater productions together, and over the course of that process, we learned that we were, neighbors one street apart. And so, it was the occasional, hey, you want to come over for tacos? Your husband's out of town. Sure. And vice versa. And then, the Coco Roro hit and we sort of fell into each other's circle that way.
The COVID circle.
Yeah.
And we were, as everyone was, home.
Bored.
Not by choice.
Not by choice.
And
At
so
all.
I had just said, hey, I'm a podcast listener, and I thought, do you want to do a podcast? And she said, sure. I don't know
what that is,
Yeah.
but I'm game. I'm game.
And we had no idea what we were going to do it on. I mean, we originally were just going to be our crazy spiraling selves without any sort of content, and realized that we'd probably be institutionalized if we did that route. And then we just sort of stumbled on the idea of doing a Hallmark podcast. We thought, okay, this is a great way we can do a seasonal sort of 8 weeks of podcasting and see how it goes. And little did we know, Rachel, what we were diving into, because one, we did not realize that the hashtag Hallmarkies were such avid fans.
At all. Yeah.
And what we secondly didn't realize was that the Hallmarkies do not like any sort of criticism of their beloved Hallmark movies. And
it's a very serious admiration that they have, for sure.
Yeah.
And and through this process now, going in year 3, we're we get it.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
I don't know that we would necessarily voluntarily be watching these movies outside of this realm, but I see what it does, and certainly as we have written this book with that heavily plays into the Hallmark tropes, that predictability and the feel good and the knowing what's going to happen by the end of the movie is.
Yeah, there's a definite need for that and an attraction for that. And I also think that there are dedicated Hallmark fans, frenemies, if you will, of Hallmark that love to hate Hallmark and hate to love it. And so I feel like we've found a little bit of a niche there with our listeners. And then hopefully with the book, what we've done is we've sort of built on that, and we've added some spice to it. It's got all of the tropes. It's got all of the feel good, and it's also got some more edgy content. So
So you were all just like, the pandemic, we can't leave. Let's do a podcast. You like Hallmark movies. I like Hallmark movies. Let's make this happen.
Neither of us had ever seen a Hallmark movie.
Oh, really?
Never.
Like, how did you come up with that then as your idea?
Because
Brad is a sadist.
No, it was because when we started thinking about this, it was September of 2020. And so sort of looking at what was trending. And I do think like at some point Hallmark was trending on Twitter. And then I thought, oh, what about that? Countdown to Christmas. That's a thing. My mom was an avid Hallmarky, I guess you would call her.
And my best friend is an avid Hallmark.
Okay.
So so it's not like we were, completely outside of the Hallmark fan base. It just had never been me directly watching a Hallmark movie before. So yeah.
So that's an interesting thing to like dive in to podcasting about Hallmark movies and being kind of introduced to them at the same time.
Yeah, it was a shell shock, actually.
Well, and beyond that, it was a shell shock because again, my crazy brain was like, oh, we could do a podcast, no, not knowing what sort of microphones and cords and headphones and interfaces and, editing and all of that stuff. So yeah, I
It
think
was all very, very new. The whole thing was a discovery, the whole season. And I think actually even, this season has been just the whole time we've been discovering, we've just dared to suck at everything. Like, I think you have to dare to try something new. You have to be willing to suck at it. And we dared to do that. And so far, I think it's been a little bit charmed.
Yeah, to your point about, timing and I think when we sort of floated this idea around, and we're not going to name drop the Hall star that sort of was the inspiration behind us writing a book, in the sense of, well, if he can do it, we can do this.
Yeah.
But I do think that, we sort of have bent, we didn't, when we said, let's try writing a book, we didn't say, okay, we're going to write this contemporary, 120-minute Hallmark movie. It's like, all right, well, let's make it historical, and let's make it really have some Christmas magic and the spice element. And so, no, we've sort of found this very specific pocket of Hallmark fans that I think, to Molly's point, the response that we initially thought we were going to get from this book, especially from that group, that base, was, we're just going to get annihilated, because it's when you associate anything a little edgy or more adult like with Hallmark, it doesn't really align. But I have to tell you, Rachel, we've had so many, like, I want to say, like, secret DMs, like the red hot face emoji with like a heart. So it is what it is. And so through all of this, it's just been we like to just say, we have no idea what we're doing, and we still don't.
Well, I mean, 2020 was an interesting year to start watching, because it was absolutely a miracle that what they did in 2020 to make 40 movies that year is just like unbelievable. But they had some really good ones that year too. And the fact that in that pandemic, that they didn't miss a beat, like, it's just amazing to me. But there were definitely like things that I think if they'd been released any other year, it'd be like, that was a weird choice. Why'd they do that? And
when the whole town is 6 people,
right?
Or
like Royal Holiday,
like in Nashville Christmas Carol, like all of the scenes are all in rehearsal, so they didn't have to have a crowd, things like that. And they had plans for a crowd. Or in Deliver by Christmas, the ending scene, which I think actually kind of made it cuter, but the fact that they have this like very romantic scene and they're like basically quarantine distanced apart.
Yeah.
And it,
Rachel's expecting us to remember what these movies are.
I do. You don't remember?
Well, Deliver by Christmas was
it was a really good one.
It was wonderful. It was the first time we saw the African American leading lady.
Right.
Yeah, August.
Okay. Yeah. It was a lot of the, they had taken a lot of the "you've got mail" where it's the texting back and forth.
Yeah.
See,
it's a really good one.
It's a really good one.
Rachel, so just so you know, the dynamic is that Molly's the one who actually like watches these movies and takes notes. And then I just interject stupid,
obnoxious, hilarious
commentary.
Yeah.
Reading a book or listening to a podcast while I'm watching with subtitles.
To thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the good folks at Baker Publishing Group. Looking for the perfect gift for the book lover in your life? Dive into some great dual time novels this Christmas where the past intersects with the present. First up, we have By Way of the Moonlight by Elizabeth Musser. Allie Massey's dream to use her grandparents' estate for equine therapy is crushed when she discovers the property has been sold to a contractor. With weeks until demolition, Allie unearths some of Nanadale's best-kept secrets, including her champion filly, a handsome man, and one fateful night during World War II, and perhaps a clue to keep her own dream alive. Next, Where the Last Rose Blooms by Ashley Clark. More than a century apart, two women seek lost hope. Abolitionist Clara is determined to help an enslaved woman reunite with her daughter. Alice can't stop wondering what happened to her mother in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Faced with the unknown, both women will have to dig deep to let their courage bloom. Next, When the Day Comes by Gabrielle Meyer. Libby has been given a powerful gift to live one life in 1774 colonial Williamsburg and the other in 1914 Gilded Age New York City. When she falls asleep in one life, she wakes up in the other without any time passing. On her 21st birthday, Libby must choose one path and forfeit the other. But how can she possibly decide when she has so much to lose? Then we have The Master Craftsman by Kelly Stewart. When Ava Lane's dying treasure hunter father entrusts to her his mission to find a missing Fabergé egg, she has no idea how high the stakes will climb or how her allegiances will be tested. Join the hunt in this lavish dual-time narrative that plunges you into the 1917 Russian Revolution, the fall of the Romanovs, and a long-buried Soviet secret. And finally, The Extraordinary Deaths of Mrs. Kipp by Sarah Brunsfold. Frustrated reporter Aidan Kelly begrudgingly agrees to help a hospice patient prepare her obituary, but old Claire Kipp has some incredible stories and some surprises up her sleeve that promises to make this seemingly throwaway assignment a life-changing one. So head over to bakerbookhouse.com/featured/Hallmarkies to pick up one of these great books and use code Hallmarkies40 for 40% off these titles from November 14th to December 12th. That's bakerbookhouse.com/featured/Hallmarkies and use code Hallmarkies40 for 40% off. Would you say that you have become Hallmark fans through this process? Do you enjoy the movies or are still kind of, I don't know.
Well, I think it's an interesting point that you made that when we started this, it was in 2020. Mm-hmm. Because the first year that we did our podcast, it was so easy to make fun of, not only just the plots, but the probabilities of these things and the, very old-fashioned sort of Hallmark movie that people expected. And then over the last 2 years, I think we've all kind of seen that Hallmark has taken a different direction.
Yeah.
With, progressive views and character depictions and
diversity in casting.
Well, yeah, that's another interesting thing about starting in 2020, because of course in 2019 at the end is when there was the big scabuffle over the Zillow ad, and then when they had a new CEO in 2020, so that's when things just started to change, and of course the pandemic affected everything as it did for everybody, but now I think we're starting to see, because it took a while, I think, to sort of get those scripts and things that were in development kind of made, and then I think this season we're seeing the new regime, I guess, their ideas and their, kind of thing the most that we've ever seen, which is interesting. I mean, there are a few things that I've not been a big fan of, but for the most part, I've, enjoyed most of the changes.
So yeah, to answer your question, I would say, I mean, my Christmas tree is already up. So if Hallmark is having any sort of effect, I mean, it seems to be working. So, and again, I think that this has just been a really fun adventure to be able to do this with my now friend neighbor. So, even though maybe the movies are still not the greatest, it's fun to have a bowl of soup and have a glass of wine on a Saturday night and say, all right, here we go again.
Well, at least on my side. I think they're just like any studio, there are quality and there are ones that miss the mark. I mean, I think that they make some legitimately good rom-coms at Hallmark, and then others aren't good, just like anywhere else, I think.
Well, and the fact that they make so many, they produce so many, that's just also is going to create opportunity, I guess, for both really good and maybe not as good. For my part, I would say there are moments when I'm just absolutely enraptured with it, and I'm crying, and there are moments when it's like really challenging to me in terms of making me reflect on my life. Those are all good things about art, right? Those are the things humans want in art. And then there are times when I just want to just turn it off. But so I think it's still for me very much a love-hate relationship, I guess. But I think more love than hate.
Yeah.
For me.
At this point.
At this point.
What do you think is the enduring appeal of Hallmark? Why are they still as successful as, I mean, their ratings are always way higher than any of their competitors. Of course, we don't know Netflix, but ratings. But what do you think makes it so consistently popular and people really enjoy these movies? What do you think, Molly?
I think honestly, humans like predictability. I think one of the things that was most challenging about the pandemic, and one of the things I think that was most attractive about Hallmark for me during that time, was you knew how the movie was going to end in a time when we didn't have any idea what tomorrow would bring for us. So I think that predictability brings comfort for us. And then it's beauty. There's a lot of beauty. There's a lot of beauty in the scenery, in the decorations, in the people that they cast. Predictability and beauty, you can't miss with humans when you're providing that for them. And I think that for me is what I see the most about Hallmark being consistent. They're very consistent with those two things.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think there's something wonderful about sitting down and knowing exactly what you're going to get and then getting it. I mean, yes, it's great sometimes to see something that's totally original and totally different and you never seen anything like this before, and that's so exciting. But it's a different experience to have something that is comforting and familiar. Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree. What do you think, Brad?
No, I was just going to play off. We've sort of been playing with that word this year, predictability. We even did something on our Instagram story where we said, do you watch Hallmark movies for the predictability, or are you looking for something fresh? And I want to say we had, close to 200 people respond, and it was like a resounding 94% of people wanted watch these movies for the predictability. So I agree with what Molly has to say.
And I think if you want a different kind of art, you go to a different kind of artist, I think too, right? Yeah.
Well, and honestly, like Hollywood stopped making movies like this. I think that people turned to Hallmark because they just stopped making romantic comedies. I mean, this year we've seen a resurgence, which has been so nice, with Marry Me and The Lost City and Ticket to Paradise. And I hope they continue and see that all three of those movies made money. So I hope that they see that and say it doesn't have to just be on Netflix and Hallmark, but that we can have rom-coms on the big screen as well. But for years, I mean, you might get a occasional indie or Crazy Rich Asians, but it was few and far between. And I mean, it's no secret that almost all movies are made for young men between 17 and 25, and so that leaves out a lot of people.
A lot of us, yeah.
That don't get movies that speak to them or that entertain them. And so there was a void, and Hallmark stepped up and said, we're going to fill that void.
Yep. They did.
They do, yeah.
I mean, it's why I started watching. I needed my rom-com. So do you have favorites that you have covered on the podcast that in these 3 years? The ones, any that stand out?
Well, Molly's got to start this because I don't know what the titles are.
So I think one of my favorites was USS Christmas, which we actually covered our first season. And the reason for that was because this is one that my husband actually watched with me. He was in the Navy for 9 years. And so he was kind of our guest. He was definitely our guest on that episode, but he was sort of our, expert commentator, if you will. And so it was really fun to watch it with him, and especially get the stories that he told about the Navy while we were doing that. And that was a sweet, although not accurate from a military perspective, that was a sweet movie. So that was definitely one of my favorites. Delivered by Christmas actually was one of my favorites. It was a good one, and it was so kind of refreshing to see. Yeah. So and then this season, Lights, Camera, Christmas, the one we watched last weekend, I genuinely enjoyed that movie. Would enjoy that movie if it was on any network. So yeah, those are a few of mine.
Yeah, those are some really good ones. I have fondness for the experience of at least covering USS Christmas because it was written by Andrea Canning, who is the one of the correspondents at Dateline. And her husband is in the military, and I think that's why it worked as well as it did. It had that, personal connection. And it was just really cool because I got to interview her. And I mean, for me, I'm just doing this out of my house, just kind of figuring it out on my own. To be able to interview like a professional journalist was very intimidating for me, but she couldn't have been nicer, and it was a great experience. But yeah, that was definitely one of like the proudest interviews that I've done, is because she's like a real journalist. She knows what she's
Awesome. Did she give you a critique on your interviewing skills afterwards?
She was so nice.
That is cool.
But yeah, those are some good ones. Do you have, Brad, do you have like maybe Hall stars that some of the actors that maybe you tend to like their movies, or anything, or a type of movie that you tend to like?
So I was thinking the one that I really liked, and I think I had said it was the one to beat. And I'm gonna get it. It was like Undercover Christmas. It was the one that Paul Campbell wrote.
Oh, Santa Stakeout.
Santa Steak.
Stakeout.
Yeah. So I like, when you add in a little bit of a mystery, which, the first season we sort of split our time between Hallmark and the Hallmark movies and mysteries, which is where you sort of get the, I found grandma's locket in an old cedar box, and now we got to go find to it. So I do kind of miss that element.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
Yeah, it seems like strictly. Molly, you really like the more emotional ones, because the USS Christmas and Delivered by Christmas were both on Movies and Mysteries. It seems like you like those ones that like make you cry a little bit.
Oh yeah. If a movie doesn't make me cry, laugh, get angry, like those are the things that I want to feel stuff when I sit down in front of a movie. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the only thing that I think makes it hard with the emotional ones, and they can do it and they can do it well, is I think it's harder to pull off in the time allotted. I think the rom-coms you have particular archetypes and particular tropes that you don't have to do any backstory on. You just boom, they're there. This is a bad man of business. This is a fake fiance. This is, exactly. And so you can just go and make it work. Whereas I think the dramas are harder that way, because there aren't those kind of archetypes in the same way that there are for rom-coms. And so I think it makes it harder to do the conflict. And I think it makes it harder to do the resolution and just all of that to make it work. So oftentimes they feel rushed to me. And especially at the end, like the last act will often feel rushed. But I mean, there certainly are some good ones. And I liked last year, I think it was called One December Night. The one with Bruce Campbell, Peter Gallagher. Did you guys cover that?
No,
we didn't.
Oh, it was a pretty good one. I think you'd like it because it's about this duo, like folk singing duo that they broke off, but their daughter and son kind of bring them back together, and the one is starting to lose his memory, and so it had that emotion, but it was also charming and And so anyway, that's
One
one I
December
recommend.
night, I'll check it out.
I think that's what it's called. But
Okay,
just look
good.
up
So we're
Bruce
not- I'm
Campbell
not the
and
only
Hallmark
one.
movies.
But she's rattled off like 8 or 10 movie titles, knows who wrote them, knows who directed them. So we're still losing. We're still losing.
Well, let's talk about the book. So, how did you get this idea to write a book together? And because I mean, that's a lot. And I feel like so many people talk about writing a book, but then like don't actually sit down and do it, including
So-
myself in that
So
group.
I'll start by saying I've wanted to be a writer since high school.
Uh-huh.
And when I started college, I was a creative writing major. I've started 3 novels.
Mhm.
They get to a point for me, or they got to a point for me where I was in a perpetual editing phase. So that's kind of my background with writing. And then I'll let Brad take it from
Yeah.
there.
So I, as someone who, we have this podcast, we don't have merchandise, we don't have, mugs or stickers or anything like that. I thought, what would be a kind of unique take on a tangible that we could present out to people? And, you know, I don't know that many podcast hosts shows, turn author
Yeah.
in the fictional
Yeah.
world. And so really we, with us being this sort of snarky kind of criticizing duo that we are, we decided originally that we were going to do a 200-page Hallmark spoof novella.
It was hilarious, by the way.
And there are
We laughed
there
a
are
lot.
some elements that we kept. So some of the feedback that we've gotten about those scenes are, they're kind of cringy, but that was because that was the original intent, was that we
Okay.
were going to write this
Yeah.
this spoof.
Outrageous, farcical spoof. Yeah.
And so back in April of last year, after we finished the first draft, it went out to beta readers, and all of a sudden our 200-page spoof was 250 pages, 300 pages, 350 pages. And then all of a sudden, as we started to read it, and the perpetual editing, right? Molly and I used this Google Doc where we could essentially, I might be in there at 2:30 in the morning typing a sentence, and then all of a
Right.
sudden I would see Molly click into the line that I just typed, and then she would, reword it. And so then I would retaliate, and I would go back 20 pages and, do the same thing. And so again, we had no idea. We weren't sure that it was going to work, that
Mhm.
we were going to finish this. And somehow it worked. And then, we got great editors
Mhm.
and feedback, and
And it got better and better and better. And we still don't hate each other all the time.
Yeah, you got
I mean,
through it.
we
Wow.
did. I mean,
There are days, but yeah, I mean, it was not an easy process. I think the creative process with another human being is challenging.
Yeah.
I mean, weren't there a couple characters in our movie Lights, Camera, Christmas that had creative issues?
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah. So it was challenging for sure, but I think also those challenges made it much better than it would have been if either of us had done it on our own.
So I was going to ask about the process for writing it, because I always thought that would be very challenging to write a book with 2 people. Uh, so did you each kind of take turns? I mean, it sounds like you were both writing at the same time sometimes, but did you sort of say, okay, this will be I'm going to write today and then you'll write tomorrow, or, and how did you keep it cohesive so it sounded like one author?
Do you want me to start?
No, I'll take this.
Okay.
So I'm very time driven and like organized like that. So when we
Mhm.
started this process in November of last year, obviously we sat down, we sort of we had a working document and threw in some ideas, historical, contemporary, and very quickly, I think because we were in the Christmas mode already, the story, this, overarching plot was very quickly laid out.
Mhm.
And so from the start, we sort of said, well, we're going to be as difficult as possible, right? We decided we were going to write this from dual point of view in third person, past tense.
Sometimes past, sometimes
sometimes
present.
past, sometimes present. Yeah, our editor.
We just change it up.
Poor Brit. But we
Yeah.
we decided that Molly would take one character and I would take the other.
Oh, nice.
And because we were novice at this, when we broke it up into 4 months, September, October, November, December, we sort of said, okay, by January 15th, we'll be at the end of September at, and so that's how we sort of laid it out to get us where we needed to go. And then we decided that within the chapters, there would be a little cranberry break. And so, whether the first part of the chapter was in Sarah's point of view and then it switched to Nick's. So that was how we were able to both be doing it at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
And then back to that haha funny of Molly editing and me going back and doing the same thing. I think that to your question, Rachel, that's I think how we found that continuity in tone and voice was because every word is a combination of both of us going back through, hundreds of times.
The first draft would have been so stark, to read it. I went back and read it and I was like, it was so stark who wrote what. But because we had almost like a rock tumbler, we had tumbled those words around over and over and over enough that it was truly like a blend of our voices.
How did you decide to make it set in 1910, to make it in the past as opposed to contemporary?
I'm also going to answer this question. Okay. because Rachel, Molly has an affinity for very odd, a passion for sci-fi and fantasy and originally
historical.
She was begging for this to be a Viking romance novel.
Oh, no. So you're like when Doctor Who goes back in time, you're like that's your sweet spot. You love that. Yeah.
And so, but truthfully, how we landed on 1910, and it's so funny because I would say probably 30% of this process was the research.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What the buildings look like, what the buildings were called, learning the geography. And
did they say dad in 1910? Yeah.
Right.
That kind of stuff.
But, one of the crucial plot points towards the end is a storm. I guess at this point, our book's been out for 3 weeks, so we can
people know that kind of. Yeah.
So there's a storm. And our friend Kristen, who has appeared on our podcast in a variety of roles at this point, she threw out, what about Prince Edward Island? So then I threw that out to Molly, who then said, absolutely.
He was trying anything to get me off the Viking track. Yeah.
Anne of Green Gables was like the immediate, flag that popped up. And then through our research, looking at the almanac, the storm. So people that tell us that we didn't put enough like historical research into the book. December 16th, 1910 is the largest snowstorm in Prince Edward Island history.
Yes.
And so
up till that date. Yeah.
The whole book is wrapped around that particular day when Sarah has to go deliver the cranberries.
Well, I was going to ask if you were just like jonesing for an excuse to expense a trip to Prince Edward Island.
Oh yeah. We have to sell a few more books. just a fewer 7,000 books.
I've always thought if I was a writer, I would definitely set one in Hawaii because then I would just have to go research.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was Kristen's idea to set it in Prince Edward Island. Neither of you have ever been there, or?
Only in my dreams.
No. So again, that's where it was like, okay, where's the closest train station to the northernmost part of the island? I mean, and we kept the names. I mean, there's very few fictional elements about the island itself.
Yeah.
From the general store to the.
Well, and the resources are out there. If you want to see what did the main street of Tignish, PIE look like, or PEI look like in 1910. There are pictures of those things. If you want to, Google Street View, I kind of feel like I have been to North Point Lighthouse and in PEI because the resources are there.
Yeah.
So there was a tremendous, like Brad said, a tremendous amount of research, Google mapping, Google Street View, all kinds of, photographic research.
But even like elements of, jeans were first produced
Mhm.
Levi Strauss in Reno, Nevada, which is where we're from. So, we tried to sprinkle in these Easter eggs on top of the breadcrumbs that, some people have picked up on.
Some have not.
Some have not.
Yeah.
So yeah, we really tried to really pay attention to the details along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. So as you've mentioned, the book is a little bit spicy, certainly more so than Hallmark. So what was that like writing those passages? Was that like, I don't know, that just seems like that would be
It was incredibly,
surreal.
it was surreal. And we never
Well, that's
wrote,
one way to describe it.
we never wrote any of those in the same room at the same time.
No.
Yeah.
Never.
That
So
would be better.
yeah. Oh, yeah. So
And again, we want people to understand that yes, we are platonic neighbor friends.
Right.
So there is a kind of a reason why for our first book we kind of had these kind of cringeworthy spice
because
moments.
the whole thing was a little cringeworthy
for us to do. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I would think being platonic friends, that would make it even more awkward to write those scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think I think it added we laughed so much through it
gosh,
because it was like, are we really gonna, who's gonna type that word? You're gonna type, you type it, and again, yes, most of those scenes were written late at night individually, and then we were editing those when we knew the coast was clear.
Yeah.
Well, and we neither of us take ourselves real seriously. So.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
Well, I had fun with it. I thought it was I liked the characters of Sarah and Nick. So how did you kind of come up with their characters? How did you develop them?
Well, do we want to give away who wrote who?
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, I guess before we answer that, Rachel, did you follow the breadcrumbs?
I think so.
Okay.
You know the secret?
No, I think with the characters, I think it was, again, it's 1910, so we were really trying to add 21st century elements where, like a character like Nick, if he was in 2022, like he clearly has probably some substance issues.
Mhm.
He's got some anxiety disorder,
Mhm.
or depression that's, undiagnosed and untreated.
They both get pretty sloshed at times.
They do. Well, that
Both
berry
of them.
wine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's good, man. It's good stuff.
And yeah, I think Sarah too, she probably has some unresolved PTSD, and she's a woman born in the wrong generation.
Mhm.
So I think those were some foundational elements that we wanted to incorporate into the characters.
Well, and there's a lot of my family too. Like, I mean, I think you write what you know. I know you write what you know, right? Or you write what interests you. So the people that we created in this book are interesting to us.
Mhm.
Or they have elements of our character or people's character that we either love or don't like so much. I mean, we tried to make them interesting and fun and real so that they were relatable. And again, it's the same process where one of us started one character and one started the other, and then together we refined them into what people are reading now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I enjoyed it. So people can find our affiliate link in the description if people want to check it out. and you can find it anywhere where they sell books. So you should all check it out. But we like to end our interview with some fun Christmas questions. So I'm going to ask both of you. First off, what is your favorite holiday drink? Why don't you go, Molly?
My favorite holiday drink is definitely going to be eggnog, and I kind of Brad's gonna barf. I'll put whiskey in it. I'll put cognac in it. My husband really likes Kahlua in it, which is odd to me, but eggnog, yeah.
Brad?
I'm going like traditional hot apple cider.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yep.
What is your favorite holiday cookie or treat?
Mine's peppermint bark. 1000%.
Man.
Sounds good.
Oh, I don't know. I have no idea. I'm not really a dessert person.
Okay.
Something lemony.
Yeah, sure. A lemon bar, a Christmas lemon bar.
Okay.
Can't go wrong.
What is your favorite Christmas song or carol?
White Christmas.
Pretty good.
I'm a real traditional carol person. My actual favorite is called Once in Royal David City. No one has ever heard of that. So I'll say, O come, Emmanuel.
Oh, nice. Okay. What is your favorite classic Christmas movie?
Well, define classic, because my
Right.
my ultimate favorite Christmas movie is The Santa Claus with Tim Allen.
Okay. I think that counts.
For me, it's A Wonderful Life.
That's
Huge Jimmy Stewart fan. Yeah.
That one will bring on all the feels since you like those
Yep.
emotional ones.
I do.
Yeah. Can't beat it. All right. Which do you like better, Scrooge or the Grinch?
Oh, the Grinch.
Same.
Okay. Clear lights or colored?
I went first last time.
Classic white.
Colored.
Okay. Would you rather be in a snowball fight or build a snowman?
Snowball fight.
Yeah, you get to throw things at your neighbor friends.
Throw things.
Well, the thing about building a snowman is it has to be a lot of snow.
Right.
So
But snowball fights.
you can have
especially
just a little bit.
where we're at, it's mostly like slushy ice
It is,
snow.
Yeah.
So it really pelts you.
Yeah. All right. Would you consider yourself a good gift wrapper or not?
Oh, yeah, I
No.
am.
Bags. Amazon bags all the way.
Yeah. All right. Last question. Do you have an ugly Christmas sweater?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
What does it look like?
Oh, it's well, I made an ugly Christmas sweater that has just a whole glob of crap on it, and it was during 2020. So I also have an ugly Christmas mask. So
Oh, nice.
the matching ugly Christmas mask.
Yeah, I do have an ugly Christmas sweater. It has a snowman on it, but it has some ornaments hung in a strategically placed location on the sweater. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
It's for the holiday adult office party.
Sounds good. Well, thanks so much to both of you for coming on the podcast and supporting the podcast. I really appreciate it. And like I said, we'll have the links for the book and for your show in the descriptions. People should definitely check it out. And you have your social media. Are you just on Instagram or do you do Twitter?
We do the Twitter.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
we might even be blue check verified at this by the time this episode comes.
You're putting out the $8, huh?
Yeah, we're at Home for Hallmark on both of those.
So don't spend the $8. Become a patron for $8. Much better benefits. But yeah, thanks again, and hope you both have a very Merry Christmas and enjoy the rest of Countdown to Christmas.
Thanks, Rachel.
Thanks.
You too. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
We'd like to thank Molly and Brad for coming on the podcast. This was so much fun to get to talk with them. I hope you all enjoyed it, and let us know what you think about all the things we talked about in the comments or on Twitter. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. So check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast to Hallmarkies Pod and Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. It really helps us a lot. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate that so much. We also have our Patreon group, like we mentioned, and the merch store, which has tons of fun festive designs. And thanks again to Molly and Brad. We'll talk to y'all later. Bye.